So you've gone to your local Lexus dealership looking for a crossover to buy. You start wading through the seas of NXs, RXs, GXs, and LXs, and you find them all to be just a little bit too big and a little bit too expensive. Well, hiding back in the corner of that dealership, you'll probably find one of these, the Lexus UX. And now that it is hybrid only, that means you're actually going to get more performance and more fuel economy standard, which makes this a much more compelling package. So let's take a closer look. The UX hasn't really received a major refresh since it first came out a few years ago, so we still have the familiar Lexus front grille, no Lexus spindle body that you see on the new RX. Perhaps in the next generation UX we'll see that kind of design change, but for now we have the venerable Lexus spindle grille here, and I still think it looks pretty elegant, especially in this beautiful blue paint here. Up front we do have full LED headlights with the LED Lexus L signatures right here. However, we do have incandescent turn signals, but luckily LED fog lights down here in the corner. If you're a fan of the directional wheel design look with the two-tone color scheme, you'll definitely want to check the box for these factory accessory 18-inch wheels that ride on Bridgestone Turanza 225/50 tires. At 177 inches long with a 103.9-inch wheelbase, the Lexus UX is one of the longest options in its competitive set. However, the all-new 2023 BMW X1 is 0.2 of an inch longer. But this is going to be longer than things like the Mercedes-Benz GLA, the Volvo XC40, as well as the Audi Q3. But the one area where you'll notice those vehicles are shaped quite differently than this is in height. This is a lot shorter than a lot of those offerings and has less ground clearance than most of them at only 6.3 inches. But I mean, just look at the side profile. Look how wedge-shaped this car is. This is definitely a shorter vehicle than those other models. Just visually, these roof rack crossbars definitely give it a taller look, but overall, you're gonna find more ground clearance and more usable interior headroom in the competitive set. If you go with the F Sport handling or design package, this is a handling model right here. You do have the option of this really beautiful ultrasonic blue mica paint with the combination black roof. No, it's not a panoramic moonroof up there. It is just a standard size roof, but the black paint does give it that illusion. What also helps is the added utility you get from these roof rails and crossbars, which are of course accessories from the factory. Standard on all UX models, you're going to find automatic high beams, adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane departure warning with lane tracing assist, road sign assist, blind spot monitor with rear cross traffic alert, and the only optional feature, an automatic parking system. As I prefaced with at the start of this video, the UX is now hybrid only, which means you will only find this powertrain under the hood. This is the 2-liter Lexus hybrid system that produces 181 horsepower. No torque figures because Toyota and Lexus don't usually provide that. But this is a very similar system to what you'll find under the hood of the new Corolla hybrid and the Prius, of course, over at Toyota. Now here, if you want all-wheel drive, that'll get you 39 miles per gallon combined. If you get front-wheel drive only, that will give you 42 combined from a 10.6 gallon fuel tank. The front seat of the UX is actually surprisingly comfortable. You don't really feel like you're sitting too high off the ground because, well, you aren't. And both seats are very comfortable. We have 10-way power adjustability on this side with only 2-way lumbar adjustment. I would like to see 4. This is a Lexus after all. And over on that side, there is no lumbar support adjustment, but you can do height adjustment, which is nice to see on this trim level. Now, this steering wheel is heated on this model. It also has a power adjustment, but you have to have the car turned on for that to work. But it does go tilt and telescoping. And because this is a Lexus, we actually have a 3-person memory seat setting for this driver's seat. There are no memory settings over there for the passenger side. And sitting upright in the proper driving position, I have about 3 to 4 inches of headroom above my head. This one does have the standard size moonroof, and it doesn't exactly go all the way over to the left over your head, so you will be bumping up against the actual headliner right here if you are taller than me by 4 inches. The backseat of the UX is probably the main reason you'd want to consider bumping up to an NX or even an RX in the Lexus lineup, But if my memory serves me correctly, even though this seat is all the way back and my knees are touching the seat back, this is still not quite as tight as the back of the Mazda CX-30, but does feel very similar in terms of its compactness. Now, considering headroom, I do have about 3 or 4 inches, just like up front. I'd say the roof line stays about the same and even comes up a little bit higher back here because of the sunroof right here. So if you lean your head all the way back, I have plenty of headroom. But if you're taller than 6 foot, you're definitely going to be tight back here no matter how you sit in this car. And then if I move over to the center, which is a chore, there is a slight hump in the floor down here, but once you're here, you know, the seat back is pretty hard compared to the outboard positions. You are sitting up a little bit higher, as is usual for a back seat like this. But you could definitely pinch 2 people back here for a long road trip and ask this person to slide up and this person to slide up, and I think you could make this work. But 3 across is going to be pretty tight. But Lexus makes up for that by putting 2 air vents right here in the center console and only 2 USB-C charge ports, again, really favoring these outboard positions. There is also an armrest that folds down right here and has 2 cup holders in the center there. No pass-through or anything, of course, because this is a crossover. You just fold the second row down. These do fold 60/40. With this model's optional foot-activated tailgate, I can, with the key in my pocket, wave my foot under the tailgate here. You do have to do it a couple of times for it to register that a human foot is doing that on purpose. But once you get it to work, the hatch will automatically lift open to reveal 17.1 cubic feet of space, which isn't amazing, but again, remember the size of this vehicle. I can fit our camera case both directions and still close this. A 22-inch roller bag, probably maybe 3 or 4 could fit back here, but not standing straight up vertically, because even this right here, if I stand it up straight, it's not going to clear that even if I push it all the way to the back. After removing this sort of flimsy tonneau cover here, you do have to like do some origami, get it out of the little hooks it comes on. It would barely clear the roof opening right here, so you wouldn't be able to close that. And this isn't even the size of most 22-inch roller bags. Some of them are wider and some of them are thicker. So again, if you want to fit that kind of luggage in a more flexible way, this is definitely going to be a little bit less usable than something larger like an NX. However, underneath all this, Lexus does give you extra storage if you want to utilize that space. If I lift this up, we do have a deeper well down here for more flatter cargo pieces that you want to put down here. And then below that, there is no spare tire, but there is more divided storage down here with all of the elements needed to lift the car up and replace a wheel or a tire if you needed to. Starting our tour around the interior of the UX, keep in mind this is the top trim, the F Sport handling package, with the optional red leather. These are heated and ventilated seats. We've got a nice black stripe that runs down the middle. Well, it's disconnected right here, but you can see the perforation for that ventilation function. These are, of course, height adjustable headrests with the F Sport logo right there embossed into the headrest. Then over here on the dashboard, this is really just a mixture again of, harder injection molded plastic, a stitched upper portion here that is softer to the touch and looks nice, gives it some layering here. I would have liked to have seen more of the red from the seats come up here to this higher area, but overall, this is just fine to me. Over here you have the glove box. The button to open that is right there, and it's decently sized. It's more of a shelf style, so you slide things in. It's not super tall, but as you can see, you can fit a thick manual right there, and you could probably fit a smaller tablet in there as well. Up top here, we do have that standard size moonroof. I would like to see a larger one for a next generation if that is coming for real, but it's nice we have one at all. Then right up here are the controls for that moonroof, as well as the Lexus Inform SOS Safety Connect feature if you want to contact the authorities in the case of an incident. But now the main change you'll find compared to older UX models, we now have the latest version of the audio multimedia system found in the newest Toyota and Lexus products. This does come with a lot of subscriptions though. If you want to keep a lot of the features you find on here, including the Hey Lexus voice commands or the tethered navigation, you will after a year or so start to have to pay money for it. But luckily we do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which gives you the option of bypassing all of that unnecessary monthly payment. And as you can see, we have the latest Android Auto right here, which gives you this sort of split screen widget setup like you find in Apple CarPlay. And though I will say that is somewhat of a copy, I do find that it makes it more usable in terms of having multiple views of information instead of having to swap between them all the time. At least you now can see them both right here on the main screen, or you can of course click to have your maps go fully widescreen like so. As you can see, there isn't really a home screen. You just push through the various different views to go from music to phone to your car settings, like so. Down here we have the row of buttons for your automatic climate control. It is just a dual zone, but I do like these toggles. They're just up and down to control the various buttons you see on here. But there's no button to turn on or off AC, so I assume as you're just changing the temperature, the air conditioning unit will turn on and off accordingly. And then as we go down this way, this is the optional Qi wireless charge pad. It does fit my Google Pixel 6 Pro, though charging it requires me to take that case off. It doesn't really like charging through that case per se. Then over here we have two cup holders, two USB ports right here. These are two USB-C. The one on the right and left both are for charging, but if you want to plug in your phone as well to do the Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, you can do those there. Then we have our traditional Lexus shifter, and notice no more remote touchpad or joystick thing. That is no longer part of the Lexus portfolio, and the only cars left that have it will be getting rid of it eventually. Here we have your heated and ventilated seat controls as well as your heated steering wheel. You can select to have those all in automatic mode, so based on the outside temperature, it'll decide what to turn on and turn off. Down here you have your EV drive mode button and your auto brake hold. This mode only works at speeds below 25 miles per hour with the lightest touch of the accelerator pedal. Anything more and the engine will turn back on, but this mode is always perfect for parking lot driving, or if you're in a drive-through fast food line, EV mode is really worth it. And then right here we have the traditional Lexus shifter, no rotary dial like you see in the new RZ. Then right here we have a two-way opening center storage area, so you can open it from either side. And it's not super wide, but it is kind of deep. You could probably fit a large water bottle here laying down, but you couldn't put a water bottle in here standing straight up. You do have one USB-A port right here and a car jack right here. And it even has one of these old style, it's not an actual cigarette lighter, but it does have a thing that pops out like this. Reminds me of the old days. Now through here is the instrument cluster, which has that physical ring that slides right and left in order to reveal the settings menu. So if you want to view your settings, that big ring around the tachometer there will slide over to the right. But once you close the settings, it moves back to the center. Up here we have the Lexus steering wheel. This is the F Sport design steering wheel that you will only get on the F Sport models. And it has all the buttons right where you need them to be. The paddle shifters I mentioned earlier. It's heated, and it's actually surprisingly thick and grippy. This is a pretty meaty steering wheel for such a small car that's not exactly the most performance oriented, but that's what you get when you go with the F Sport route. On the left side of the steering wheel, we have controls for your audio and what's going on in the LCD instrument cluster. And over on the right, we have your adaptive cruise control settings, as well as the mode and fast forward or playback buttons for your audio system. Now over here on the far left, there are a couple of buttons, two blanked. I'd like to see those filled in with something instead of nothing on this top trim. But this button is very interesting. That is automatic sound control. That will turn on the augmented sounds from the speakers that give this engine a growl that it doesn't actually have. And it's a little wacky, I'll talk about it in the drive section, but it makes the car make noises that otherwise it's not ever going to make. It actually imitates the sound of a tachometer revving and changing gears, even when this transmission is not doing any of those things. It's very funny, and I don't recommend leaving it on, but at first it is very comical to hear that thing going. Getting the updated Lexus UX Hybrid out on the road presents a few interesting scenarios. The first one is the fact that there's a pretty big blind spot in your B pillar here over on the left and on the right. It's a pretty thick pillar, so it's a good thing we have the blind spot monitor. That definitely helps with the viewing of the blind spots, but otherwise it is somewhat noticeable. And the other thing you'll notice is, just like the other models in Toyota and Lexus lineup with this hybrid system, it's very smooth, it's very quiet, and it's always going to start off with electric propulsion. But unlike the plug-in hybrids that Lexus and Toyota uses, the amount of time you're going to be using just electricity alone is much shorter here. So you do have to have a feathered touch with your foot in order to get, up to 25 miles per hour with just electricity powering you through. Otherwise, the electric motor is always going to kick in, but it's pretty quiet in doing so. When it comes to acceleration, it took me 8.4 seconds in this all-wheel drive equipped model, which is in between the official front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive numbers that Lexus has provided. So it's pretty good, and that's one of the reasons, of course, they decided to go with the hybrid-only route this time around. The performance is much more usable around town. Sure, from a stop, 0 to 60 is pretty slow compared to most other things out there right now, but once you're at speed around town, it is much more usable. When it comes to braking, the brake feels very smooth, very Lexus-like. There's no dead space at the top of the pedal. The travel is pretty well modulated. It doesn't feel bumpy or anything out of the ordinary. It just is a very easy brake pedal to live with, and the blending of the regenerative and friction brakes is very smooth. So you don't really notice that they're switching between the two. Honestly, no complaints with the brakes whatsoever. It took me 128 feet to get from 60 miles per hour back to 0 with them, which is on par with the more mainstream offerings in this segment. There may be some sportier German alternatives that can do better, even at the base level. If you got like an AMG line package of a GLA or something like that, you might find the braking on those to be a little bit more prominent, if you will. When it comes to handling, this is one area the UX Hybrid has actually really surprised me this week. Now remember, we have the F-Sport handling package, so we do get the adaptive dampers and the sportier suspension overall, but I do wish this was how all of the UXs drove, because this has a really nice balance of that isolation from the road you expect from Lexus with the same dash of sportiness you get from other F-Sport models in the lineup. Traditionally, the UX has been one of the more boring options in its most recent lineup. Lexus has definitely, turned up the dial on sportiness over the years, but this model has kind of been left behind. But with this handling package, I think it definitely does a lot better than a typical UX and should satisfy most shoppers cross-shopping with the German competitors. The steering itself is actually pretty direct. It's not overly heavy, but it's definitely heavier than a normal non-F-Sport steering rack. And the feedback is not really too intense, but that's to be expected from a Lexus model like this. But overall, I think that Lexus could make this setup the standard setup and then offer something a little bit sportier with more power, more like 200 plus horsepower. But clearly the demand is not there, therefore you probably will never see that. And the next generation UX is on its way, so those decisions have probably already been made, and we'll have to wait and see what Lexus has cooking up for this model. Even in the transition to this F-Sport handling package, ride quality is still extremely Lexus-like. It's very smooth, it's very comfortable. Smaller bumps in the road don't even really make their ways into the cabin, and larger bumps will definitely be noticed and cause a little bit of a fuss in the suspension travel, but we do still have an independent suspension in the back, so things are pretty much kept in check overall. Cabin noise is also very subdued. This is not a super loud car, even for it being the entry-level Lexus model. I measured 57 decibels at 50 miles per hour, and the nice thing about it is if you're coasting, if you're just letting your foot off the gas and coasting, the engine is always going to turn off. So you're always going to be in EV-only mode if you're coasting. So that's when it gets really quiet. And out on the highway, especially in eco mode, the car is going to do the best it can at keeping you from using that gas engine, especially if you're going downhill. You don't really need much more torque. That engine is not going to kick in as often. The other main reason Toyota switched to having this be hybrid only is, in addition to their goal of becoming very carbon neutral in the next few years, they wanted to make sure that you got the most efficiency out of this model, and you definitely do. Even in this F-Sport handling model, I managed 41.4 miles per gallon in my test loop around the Detroit Metro, and that is way better, way better than what you're going to find in any Mercedes-Benz GLA, any Audi Q3, or any Volvo XC40 aside from the recharge. That is one area Volvo has one up to this, but that should be remedied for the next generation UX. You can get a Volvo XC40 recharge, all electric with a decent amount of range. We'll have to see what the range looks like on an all-electric UX when that does eventually come. But for now, for the non-electric models, the UX has the entire industry beat in this segment.
Now it's time to summarize my findings on the Lexus UX, starting with the fact that the UX F-Sport handling model that I was testing is actually kind of fun to drive. It's more fun to drive than any other UX model, but remember, you do have to go up to the top trim, the F-Sport handling model, to get the adaptive dampers that make it so fun. But even if you don't go to that model, there are a lot of other attributes of the UX that make it appealing, like its upscale interior. Now, in terms of materials, it's not going to be as nice as an ES or an LS, but design-wise, it's very similar. So in a way, you'll feel like you spent more money than you did. The main reason you would want to pick a UX over its competition is fuel economy. You are going to do, in some cases, double the fuel economy of things like an Audi Q3 or a Mercedes-Benz GLA, and nobody else offers a hybrid system, let alone standard like the UX does. So more brownie points to the UX. The UX also has the lowest base price in its competitive set, which gives it a really good advantage for those who are trying to get into a luxury brand but don't have the money to spend $40,000, $50,000. Now, the one I was testing was $50,000, but that's fully loaded. You can get into a UX for under $40,000. We'll get to that in just a minute. Power is really usable in the UX. The standard hybrid system is much better than the old gas model in terms of acceleration and performance. But if you're looking for something with over 200 horsepower and perhaps a sub 7 second or maybe sub 6.5 second 0 to 60 time, you're going to want to look elsewhere. Also, all-wheel drive is not standard on the UX like it is on something like an Audi Q3, but even optioning all-wheel drive back into your UX is going to keep the price well below the starting price of the Audi Q3 and its competitors. The cargo area is super tiny. This is, of course, Lexus's smallest model. It's really, really tight back there. But the silver lining is the passenger area in the second row is actually not as abysmal as I was expecting. I fit just fine back there. It's not as claustrophobic as you might think. And finally, we're missing out on the latest version of Lexus safety system, which is version 3.0. It features some cool things like proactive drive assist, which I think is something that every car should have. But if you want that, you're going to have to go to another Lexus model. As you can see, the UX has the lowest starting price in this segment, but even if you do add all-wheel drive, you're still going to undercut these base prices of these competitors you see here. So the value play is very strong already, but as you go up to the top end of the lineup, you're still going to undercut the other options. You're going to come in right around $48,255. The model I was testing went past $50,000, but it was featuring some factory accessories, and I don't consider those part of the top level price. The Mercedes-Benz, in typical Mercedes fashion, can be optioned way past what most people would consider for a car like that. It starts right around $39,000, so not too bad, but if you go crazy, you can go past $60,000, and that's before getting into the AMG 35 model. So keep that in mind. The BMW X1 is the newest model in this list. It was just redesigned for 2023. It starts at just a hair below the Audi, but goes way past it at $52,000 or so, fully loaded. It's going to have the nicest interior of the bunch in terms of design, tech, and features. It has the latest BMW iDrive system, and it might feel a little bit, better in terms of interior materials quality, but dynamics-wise, driving it, it's not going to be that much different from the German competition. It'll probably be on par with the best driving version of the UX. So let me know what you think about all that in the comments section. I want to know if you think the UX is worth it over these competitors, because there are a lot of things they have going for them, but the UX has the standard hybrid system. Would that be something that would make you consider it over the other options? Let me know down below. And thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate your view. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, as well as the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, EV Buyer's Guide, and the Alex on Auto's website for all the written reviews. Until next time, take care.